Hi, beautiful souls. It's Sadhana. Just let me adjust. Actually, it's okay. How's that? I have a new camera tonight, so I'm hoping that the picture is a little bit clearer because I know it's been fuzzy. It's also earlier in the day, so it'll be a lot brighter because I've got light. I'm sitting in front of a window, so there's more natural light, so that should help as well too. But yeah, and I just wanted to say, so welcome. My name is Sadhana for those of you that are new to my channel, and this is my weekly chat. Usually I'm on a little bit later, and this is still quite a new regular spot for me, and I'm trying to find a time that works better internationally so I can have as many people as possible involved in the chat. And yeah, I know it takes time to build, but let me know what time you prefer if you are here tonight and you want to comment later, because I just love it to talk with you live. And so yeah, so let me know about that. Oh, and then the camera. So one of the things when I started, so the very first time I went live, it was a disaster due to Wi-Fi and various things, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I reached out to somebody else in the tarot tribe on YouTube, and I kind of got these kind of short answers. Well, go ask somebody else. You know, there's all these videos, there's all this information on YouTube about how to kind of set up your space, how to set up your camera, your sound, and everything. And I just found it all really overwhelming and confusing because I had very specific questions about how to do what I wanted to do. And so I want to let you know that if you have questions about setting up cameras, setting up yourself to do a live or to do anything, please feel free to ask. I'm really happy to support you in that way as well too, because it was quite a challenge for me to get going on this as well too. Yeah, and it's a process, definitely. And I know over time, at Christmas, I put lights on the screen behind me, and I really want to kind of work on my background and all kinds of things like that. But it takes time to build. So yeah, so step by step, right? Tonight, we're going to talk about past life readings and how I go about doing that with cards and why I do it. And we're going to look at lots of different decks, and I'm going to give you some different questions to focus on, as well as just the kind of spreads that I work with and how I do that. So hi, Kyle. And yeah, so that's kind of what we're up to tonight. But I have an announcement. I'm not sure if you're aware. So I did New Beginning 2020 early in the year. This was a 24-hour tarot event hosted by Wasima. And my first live wasn't that bad. My first live, I think, was my 500 subscriber giveaway, and it was pretty bad. It was very foggy, very fuzzy. And I can tell you why that was if you're interested. So if you do want to chat about tech stuff, I'm happy to chat about tech stuff because I really want to support all of you in your adventures with YouTube because it's really fun. So anyway, back to the 2020. So Wasima, whose channel is Ascension Tarot? Ascension, I'll have to think about it. Pretty unusual name. So her name is Wasima Tarima, I think. And so she set up this beautiful, and you can get her, Ascension Waves is her channel. And she set up this really great event early. It was called New Beginning 2020. And I spoke about grounding and setting intentions, I think, for the year. And Wasima is organized another event, and it's on the Valentine's weekend. And I think it's on the Saturday. I'm just going to go to my calendar. And of course, I'm going to put up stuff about it on my page. No, it's on the 5th. Yeah, it's not on Valentine's Day. It's on the 15th. So the day after Valentine's Day. And yeah, so I will, it's not going to be 24 hours this time, but I will have a slot in that event, and I'm really looking forward to it. My slot, I'm going to talk about heart chakra readings, so heart-centered spreads, and how to kind of use a spread to tap into the energy of the heart chakra. So yeah, so that's my theme, and it's going to all be about love and supporting relationship and things like that. And she has some of the same people on, and I believe some new people as well too. So that'll be great. Hi, Elizabeth. Oh, hi. Nice to have you here. So yeah, so that's on the 15th of February. And like I said, if you have a time preference for this Thursday thing for me, let me know. And I know it's really hard internationally. And so for me, really Thursday, anywhere between my time, Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., I'm quite flexible. And I know it's way better in the morning. 10 a.m. Pacific seems to be a really good time, but I need to find another day, and eventually I may do a second live a week, and then we'll have a morning one and an evening one. So going to the question of past lives and past life readings, it's really kind of fun and exciting. And hi, Whale Song. And I want to, just for a moment, kind of try to reflect on what's the difference, what's the subtle focus difference between focusing on a past life reading as opposed to just doing shadow work in general. And is there a difference? And is there a different approach to it? Is there different kind of decks that you would use? And I think that they're similar. And there's just a different intention. And I really believe in the power of intention. And so the way that I came at this, and I'm sure you've heard the story if you've been following me for a while, was I've never had, what do you call it? Like hypnotherapy, where you do past life regression. I've never done that. But what I have done is had a channeled reading through one of my teachers who channels the Archangel Metatron. And she, through this channeling experience, goes back. It's really cool to sit with her. It's almost as if she goes back through these flashbacks of multiple lifetimes. And I'm not sure how she perceives the information, but what comes through is the most recent past life where the patterns you are still challenged with began. And that in itself is a really kind of profound experience to understand kind of the magnitude of the work that you're doing, and also kind of a respect for this process, the fact that you're actually in this process and you want to clear these patterns and you acknowledge these patterns and you want to actually do this work. And so I think whether you're doing shadow work or you're actually focusing the reading on a past life, that good for you, right? Good for you for being brave enough to want to kind of step forward and step up and out of your story. And I think either way you go, which other focus you take, it is very, very similar work. So with the past life reading, I come at it from using cards to help bring in pieces of the story. So there's certain decks that I like to use that might bring in geographical references, because I believe that, and I've learned this from a few different teachers, that we have karma, we have geographical karma. So there's actually issues with the land in certain places. We have family karma, so the relationships with the other people in our life. This new camera that I have has this really bright kind of white light, and it's really weird when I look at it. And the third kind of karma is your personal stuff. And of course, we have multiple issues, multiple karmas, but there's some that come to the surface as dominant patterns. And they will come through in various ways, in various gradations during your life. And I really believe that if you are not listening to the signs, if you're not listening to the messages, each time the universe brings these patterns back, they're going to come back and slam you a little harder. And eventually you get slammed really, really hard if you don't pay attention. So it's way easier if you start to pay attention from a young age. And if you have a kind of a a broader range, a bigger repertoire of how to pay attention to what's going on. Cards are one way into this, for sure. There's lots of beautiful meditations that also take you into past life journeys. And I can talk to that a little bit too if you're interested. But the thing for me that has been the most important, the most effective, is the intention of the reading. Why am I doing a past life reading? I'm doing a past life reading because in my heart, in my soul, there's this unrest, there's this unwellness, and I need help in clarifying what it is exactly, and I'm ready to move it. Okay, so Whale Song says, is there a difference between karma reading and a past life reading? Good question. Good. So the specific focus of a past life reading is to go back to a particular story that is going to reveal that karmic pattern. So a karma reading is going to look at the pattern, but a past life reading is going to take you back to a specific story that is going to reveal that pattern. Now, that pattern will present itself from lifetime to lifetime and within lifetimes in different ways, because the universe wants you to get it. The universe wants you to figure it out. Your soul wants you to figure it out. So the universe is quite creative in setting up scenarios so that you can figure this out and move on and evolve, right? So these are just subtle nuances. I hope that helps a little bit. Okay, so where was I? So the intention is really important. And for me, it is, it's big work. And I would never do a past life reading if I hadn't already done work with a client, if I hadn't already established some kind of communication. So they were clear on how I work as a reader and how I approach all readings as a healer. You're welcome. And because it's fun. It's fun to kind of dive into a meditation and hope that you will feel, I'm sure many of you have been in the presence of divine beings in your meditations and things like that, maybe even clairvoyant experiences, whether it's angelic beings or ascended masters. And those experiences are really, really profound. And sometimes we see famous characters from the past, but I don't think that's really as important as kind of tapping into your patterns, because it's these patterns that we want to clear. And I'm going to read you something that I wrote in a moment. But I just want to kind of go through this whole process because it's important. So we go to this space and time, this story, this scenario, and it's impossible to say exactly when it was. It's not possible to say that pattern was 5,000 years ago in ancient India. So my pattern was a long time ago in ancient India. I was a dancer in a temple, and it's a very, very sad story that came forth. But it was a pattern of grief. That was one part of it. And I suppose if we had spent time specifically looking at my costume, specifically looking at the environment, depending on if she was able to focus in on that clearly during the channeled session, we could have maybe picked out a 500-year period. But I don't think that's really important. What's important is the general kind of gist of the situation, of the scenario that created this pattern that you are still, oh my God, right? Ancient India to now, I'm still processing this pattern. So this is really interesting. I asked her, I said, so after the session, I said, do you think it's possible for anyone to clear a pattern in a lifetime? right? Because I think that's a really important question. Can we work through our stuff? Elizabeth says, if we've already lived thousands of lives, is it reasonable to assume that all of them have happened on Earth since humanity is relatively young, or could we have lived elsewhere? Well, I think if we lived elsewhere, it would have been, I really don't know. I've talked to lots of different quite evolved people, and my take on this is that these earthly incarnations are the most difficult. And so the reason that we have incarnated in this earthly experience is because we're brave. We're really brave souls, and we want to figure this stuff out. For one reason or another, there's this aspect of our soul, aspect of our karma that we need to kind of burn through. And so these earthly experiences are always challenging, and we just have to say, okay, we've got this. And I think that if there were other, so there's this piece, because so if you were on other planets, if you were in other constellations, if you were in other civilizations in other universes, part of me wants to believe that you were a more evolved soul, and you wouldn't be here on Earth at this time. If you were, then you would be working as a master guru, right? You would be you would have incarnated as an enlightened being, as an avatar perhaps, to help people like us to move through that. So just a few of my thoughts. These are big questions, but it's fun. I love this stuff. It's really fun. And if you have an opportunity to visit or to be with a being on this planet who is of like a really, really high frequency, these are the kind of questions that you want to start to ponder and to put together, these really, really big ones. Because I think sometimes, like if you go to an ashram to meet your guru, it's always these really kind of selfish questions that come up. So these are the kind of questions you really want to formulate and have prepared when you meet somebody like that. So, all right. Okay, first of all, I'm just gonna read a couple things that I wrote here. So last weekend I did a past life workshop with a few people here in town-ish, not too far from here. And I just wanted to read something here. Okay, so for me, the purpose of a past life reading is not to find out if you were a famous historical figure or if you are connected to a royal bloodline, but rather it's to have a look at the energy from the past that may help you work through the challenges you are presently facing. Sometimes it's hard to see the trees for the forest. So a card reading is just one approach to clarity. This is not easy work. It takes courage, honesty, vulnerability, and willingness to trust in something greater than the little self. It also requires an openness of heart and mind. It's a commitment really to being the best version of yourself that you can be, and being okay with whatever you find along the way. And that is the sticky part. That's the hard part for a lot of people. This is why I work with clients through several modalities, because sometimes it takes a few tries to hear and then integrate the messages. Okay. My dog is right here, and there's dogs outside the window. I'm praying to God she doesn't bark. Amber, good girl. Good girl, come here. Good girl. In Eastern and wisdom traditions, the energy field is to hold the patterns of our ancestors. And specifically in the chakra, and I'm putting this chakra course together, by the way. So specifically when we do the second chakra work, that's where the brunt of these patterns live. That's why there's so much, that's so hard to clear that second chakra, because that's where the karmic patterns live, according to yogic psychology. In Eastern and wisdom traditions, the energy field is believed to hold the patterns of our ancestors, our family matrix, and our past lives, which is really all the same thing. The energy field lives within and beyond every cell of our being. It is embedded in our DNA. So this is also another way to look at, if you have done a genetic profile, it's another way to look at your, like if you have a genetic syndrome that is in your profile, to look at it as part of your karmic pattern, your past life patterns, right? It's not just this physical disease that you have inherited from your great-great-grandmother. If we can become aware of these patterns, then we can begin to make changes towards our evolution. In a past life reading, we intend to bring into focus the most recent past life where the pattern began. It can help in understanding the magnitude of the work to be done in clearing the pattern and the urgency to get busy at it, right? To stop mucking around and do your practices and do the work that needs to be done so you can begin to shift this. And I've talked about how to shift these patterns before, and that was part of that live that I did with Wasima. And basically there's a couple of things, right? There's a gazillion practices depending on what your pattern is, but also learning to have the courage to kind of step back and then to do it differently, to have enough awareness to do it differently. And so that's why, as readers, as people who are stepping on this spiritual path, it is imperative to do work and practices to clear your third eye chakra, your Agnya chakra, whether that is through focused breath practices or even like, I think I've talked about this before. So when I did my first course in psychic awareness, and it wasn't a psychic awareness course. Well, it's all psychic work, but in the chakra psychology. So our prep for the course was to do neti pot every day for the month before we attended the first session. And for most people, neti pot is something you do when you aren't feeling well, right? Or you have allergies. But in the yogic tradition, neti pot, and you can also do it with all kinds of strings and various things, is a way to begin to clear this psychic center. And we are going to talk about that in my chakra course, because it's a really, really amazing practice for developing your perception here. And we do that, we want to do that so that when we get to the mucky stuff in the first, second, and third chakras, we have a much greater awareness, and we can step back and we can step up and out of our stories and see our stories for what they really are, for the lessons that they really are. And sorry, I just wanted to finish this. There's like one sentence left and I lost my place. We can understand the magnitude of work to be done in clearing the pattern and the urgency to get busy at it. These patterns block the natural flow of life force energy, keeping us depressed, anxious, and in poor physical health. Bringing awareness to these patterns is the first step that you and I can do. So I'm just going to read what Whale Song wrote here. In doing something differently, that is important, or is it a different outcome that is important? Kind of like saying all paths lead to Rome. Okay, so let me think of an example. So let's suppose and this is fairly close to home for me. Let's suppose you have a pattern of anger. You have an issue with anger, and it's easy for you to express anger. So through yelling, right? Through raising your voice, and the result of that is it creates this sense of physical exhaustion, and it's very, very hard on your sympathetic nervous system. It creates this reverberance of negative energy to everyone else that's in your household, to your plants, to the environment in general. Even, kind of bouncing, like if you think of sound waves, if you think of energy waves, it bounces off right all around you. Your whole neighborhood is affected by these screaming matches that happen. So maybe you have a pattern of anger. So what does it mean to do it differently? Well, it starts by the trigger happens, and instead of opening your mouth, you close your mouth. Or you turn around and you walk away. And you begin to find new ways to deal with that trigger. And these patterns, there's always a trigger, and we all react in different ways to our patterns and different things. But to do it in a different way means that, so in the yogic psychology, these karmic patterns, these samskaras, are like grooves, right? They're actually grooves that imprint themselves into your, I don't know, like actually into your cells, perhaps, into your energy body. And so it's very, very hard when we're in a groove. It's like it's easier to stay on the track. And I used this metaphor before, like when you're on, those cars at the fair, like when you go to a playland or something, and you drive those cars, and it wouldn't it be nice in the bumper cars bumper cars aren't in a groove. You can go any way you want. But some of those rides where the car just stays on the track, and there's no way, like you can't go in a different direction. You have to go in that direction. So that's what your patterns are like. Your patterns are you set in these grooves, completely solid, and you can't go any other way because you don't know any different and you don't know how. So the first step is always becoming aware. And what doing this kind of reading does is it is just another layer of your awareness, amplifying your awareness. So step one is awareness. And then step two is to behave differently, right? So that you don't go on that same path. You go in a different direction. So that over time, that groove begins to fill in, and it's not so deep, and it's easier for you to move in a different direction. Okay? All right. So I have done a video on this before, and in the community page on my channel, if you go there, the link for that video is there, and it was in one of my deck combo videos where I did the pairings, and I talked a little bit about past life readings. So you're going to get more info in that video as well too. Okay. So when I do these readings, I pick a tarot deck, and then I pick usually 3 oracle decks. And very specifically, I choose the decks to kind of work with this kind of reading. You're welcome, Lori. So, since I made that video, I've really kind of expanded the decks that I'm using for this kind of work. So let's start with the tarot decks, okay? Because I think that's the most challenging part. And I think that the decks that I share with you today, there's a lot of different reasons why you might choose one deck or another in combination with another deck. And I might not do all the tarot decks first. We'll see how this goes. And I've got way too many decks to share with you here today. I might just show you boxes. I might show you a few cards. We'll see. And some of these, of course, you'll see on that video. So, and I shared this one yesterday too. So this is the Labyrinth. And I was really, really looking hard to find decks for these readings because I was having clients that I thought would really benefit from these kind of readings, and there was requests for these kind of readings. And I think to choose the perfect kind of deck is, I don't know, it's really, really helpful. Unfortunately, this tarot deck is really small. I'll show you. It's kind of like a smaller than a low Scarabeo card. And then it has the artwork inside these huge, huge borders. And I was looking for a deck in sepia, and I was looking for a deck that had a real timeless kind of quality, not specific to any culture, not specific to any kind of era. And then I found the creator's book as well. So I bought this used book on Amazon, and it really kind of helped me to get into the artwork. So I found this deck to be, it kind of creates a distance. There's nothing personal in this deck. It just feels historical. And I love the backs of these cards. They're so gorgeous. But it is really, really small artwork. And it definitely is a pip deck. So there's no pictures on the minors at all. So if that's something that is kind of challenging, then it might not be the deck for you. But there's lots of other options out there. So you know this deck, this is the Enchanted. One of the things about this deck is it's also kind of impossible to know where we are in time and space and culture. And there's a lot of different cultures on this deck too. So if you use a deck like this one, I'm actually going to hop back and forth between tarot decks and oracle decks. And you use a deck. I should have opened all these boxes. I'm sorry. And you use a deck like this one. This is the Earth Power by Stacey DeMarco. So sometimes what happens if you have a deck like this and a deck like this, the cards are going to kind of confirm there's going to be an energy that either is through if there is a culture, or if there is a place, or there's going to be a feeling that comes up. And Doreen Virtue, I almost don't like to say that word out loud because I know a lot of people feel really emotional sometimes about the Doreen, the DV situation. So this deck, which you can still get on eBay, and oh my God, I looked last weekend before I was prepping for the workshop that I did. You can get this deck anywhere from $6 to $1,000 on eBay. So this deck also, one of the nice things about it is it has places as well too. And remember at the beginning, I was talking about how we have geographic karma. And one of you was asking about like space or different universes. So this deck definitely brings in the geographic karma. So if you're using a deck like this one or Stacey DeMarco's deck, sometimes what you're going to get is a confirmation of a geographic culture. So for me, so after I graduated from university, I went to Japan for, well, I didn't know how long I was going for at the time. And I thought I was going there to teach English. But I think my reason for going there was way more important than that. There was a lot of karma to be cleared in returning to Japan. Actually, I won't put that one away because this one I have a few examples to share with. So when you find yourself, especially moving to another completely different kind of situation, another town on the opposite side of the country, another culture, know that there's always a deeper reason for you going there. And we have these really powerful cultural connections that are as equally important as our personal karma that needs to be cleared. Hello, baby. Hello. And I'll tell you one of my karmic patterns. This is really beautiful. Okay, I'll see if I can remember. My teacher said, love every being that comes to you. I used to really not be a pet fan, especially cats. And I found myself at a retreat one time, just circled and circled with cats. And I didn't know what to do. I really didn't. I was beside myself. And I believed that I was highly allergic to cats at one point. And I'm not anymore. I can have cats sitting on my lap and surrounded with me, and I don't have allergies. But this was a pattern, nothing to do with geographic patterns. But if you can take these lessons, these chunks, and begin to see them for what they really are, it's really a powerful process. How do you work with cups as fire? Oh, that's a really good question. So in the Labyrinth Tarot, I shouldn't do that. I don't like the way you make my hands feel, and then I'm going to touch my cards. Okay. So in the Labyrinth, so what Tarot Tales is talking about. So these are the swords. The swords are blue, which fits fine with air. The pentacles are gold, which is easy to work with. Where's the green? This is really unusual too. The wands are green. Wands, fire, green. And so this is also a different kind of awkward energy. And the Tarot Tales was asking about the cups. So the cups are red. So it depends on the reading. It depends on the surrounding cards. Sometimes with the red, I go right to the blood. I go right to the root chakra. I go to what's going on with family and the family karma. What is the emotion? See, now this is the part of reading intuitively. The more different paradigms that you have, the easier it is to kind of figure out which direction to go with this. So I go to what is it about the disconnection to the family that is creating this pattern that's going on right now? And so usually, for some reason, there is what this tarot does is it brings up an emotional connection to family 9 times out of 10 if there's an abundance of those cup cards. And it's just really crazy how that happens. And so as a reader, you need to allow yourself to flow with what is coming up and not get stuck on cups and whatever your traditional association is, right? So for me, cups and water and second chakra stuff is as equally important as cups and the heart space. And it depends on the reading. So if a bunch of those red cards came up and I had a bunch of pink cards from this tarot deck, and I was using 2 tarot decks, it would be a completely different energy than if I were using different cards. So tarot tells you need to give yourself permission to not get stuck and to allow your Amber, please. You need to allow trust your intuition and to trust yourself as you work through the readings. Okay. Hi, V Love and Crystals. Okay, so then what's next? All right, so those two tarot decks work quite differently, and I don't think that you can choose wrong cards. So this is another thing too. So I go lots of different places. I go to different events and do readings. I read once a week at a store in a town near here. I'm always packing I have my basket. I throw in a few crystals and my pendulum and different decks. And it's like, how do I know what decks I'm going to need that day? I have no idea who's going to come for a reading sometimes. Sometimes I know because I have appointments, but sometimes I don't. And especially if you're doing an event. And so I try to choose a variety of decks, and I don't know, the universe has a way of telling you, and those decks are just going to kind of fall off the shelf and into your bag. And it's always the right deck. You never have the wrong cards. And the cards that need to appear will definitely appear. So as far as other tarot decks, so this is a really interesting one. And I haven't used this one a lot. It was recommended to me after I did that last video. And so I got it and I began to explore it. And the beauty of this deck, of course, is that, for those of you that have it, is that it has a lot of different cultures. And in that, it has a lot of different geographic places. So when I was doing this workshop last weekend, one of the ladies who was using this deck had the most profound reading. And in her awareness, her cultural pattern was most recently from a European culture. But the cards, as they lay out on the table, it was everything kind of connected to Egypt. And it was the same story, but it was on this other level, this other dimension, this other place. And by taking her to the culture, I mean, there's this card too. This is not one of my favorite cards in the deck. By taking her to this other time and place, she was able to confirm and to see the story from a new set of eyes. And so sometimes I think these readings take us to these times and these places because for that particular reason, we need to see the story. We need to see the pattern in a different setting, because the setting that we're used to seeing the story in is too close to home. And we haven't been able to step up and out of the story. We think it's about the relationship that's right in front of us. And we aren't able to understand that relationship in front of us is just mirroring a pattern, a lesson. It's nothing to do with the person over there. It's to do with the pattern that's inside of us that we've been repeating over and over and over again. So, that was so beautiful. She was in tears and she shared her story after she did her reading, and I think it just really affected everybody at the workshop. It was amazing. Okay, so, and I have good news about this deck. So, I'm getting confused. No, I'm not. So this is The Beautiful Rebellion by Robin L. Cole. And if you have the Tarot of Delphi, it has a very similar energy to that deck. This is also, right now it's out of print, but this deck is coming back in 2020 at some point. So I would subscribe to her mailing list. I think it's robinlcole.com. This one is The Beautiful Rebellion. Right now she's working on the, she has a beautiful shadow oracle deck that's coming out. It's on Kickstarter. I think it's got a few more days on Kickstarter. And so this definitely is not as timeless. It's a little more culture specific. But one of the things I like about this deck, and I'm just going to see if I can, did I bring the guidebook over? I didn't. Okay. I'm thinking of the Five of Wands, which is one of my favorite examples of what I'm about to say. Look at the Fool card in this deck. Isn't that pretty? Love this Fool card. And you will have seen some of these paintings in other decks because they are, and here's the World card. So have a look at that World card. And for a painting to have happened at this time with all these different women from different cultures, you know, like this artist must have been very, I feel, connected. And perhaps that young Black girl was a slave, but there's a beauty and there's a softness and there's something really special about the energy of this picture. And imagine, okay, so imagine this. I'm going to get the specific card here. I really like doing this work. I find that in doing this work, it just gives people, it's like a really quick way for the walls to go, they just come crashing down. So imagine you got this card and then you got this World card. And so I have no idea how in this lifetime the theme of slavery or imprisonment would come up. But whatever was going on right here and now in your story would take you to that deeper underlying theme that maybe this was you. And so maybe you have this pattern and this challenging relationship with your bosses. And in seeing two cards like this side by side, there might be this kind of, this breath. Oh my God, like this is old. This is old. Okay, so what do I have to do to let go of this? You know, like, oh my God, I was a slave owner, or oh my God, I was actually a slave. So in realizing this and having that insight, maybe you need a teacher, maybe you need some help with processing this, but you can let go. You can let go of this painful connection to a boss or your relationship with your superior or your landlord or something. Does that make sense? You know? And so even though these are more contemporary pictures, but I wanted to show you the Five of Wands. This is one of the crazy things about this deck. So some of these paintings are from huge landscape paintings. It's going to be the last card. Always is the last freaking card. Just bear with me here. And so Robin chose, so if you have a large landscape painting and you're doing a tarot deck, then you need to choose a portion of the painting. So this is the Five of Wands. And do you have, do any of you guys have the, like the before tarot, the after tarot, the new vision tarot, those kind of cards? Or is there's one where you turn the deck over and it's something on one side and something else on the other side? There's that deck as well too. This is kind of the same thing. So this painting comes from a huge landscape painting. So you have this picture that extends out to here and out to here. And this is just a piece of the painting. So sometimes when you get a card like this, if you can slightly blur your vision, you can begin to expand your experience into kind of the outskirts of the painting. And not specifically the painting itself, but in your imagination, through your intuition, through your clairvoyancy, you are led into, like, this is just the beginning of where you need to go. And maybe, and you've heard me talk about this with other cards and stuff too, there's something in the top right corner of a card that draws your attention and it kind of takes you in a certain direction. And that's what these cards do, because they have because they come from something bigger. They're just a piece of something bigger. Okay. So I showed you a couple of the oracle decks that I have here. And then there's like a whole range of oracle decks that I use depending on what's going on. So for a long time, I used this one. Not a long time. I have not been doing these readings for a long time because I avoided doing them until I was able. This one is a newer deck, Divine Muses. I did a walkthrough of this one. And I also did a side-by-side of Divine Muses and Vintage Wisdom because they have a little bit different energy. But there are some crazy pictures in this deck from that. And it feels like in this deck, there's quite a few different time pieces. And also, there's a lot of androgynous characters, which is really, really helpful because I feel that when you are not attached to culture, time, place, sexuality, more stuff can come up and come through. So this particular one is lunar masculine. Lunar masculine, right? This is big stuff, right? So hopefully, like, I wouldn't use this deck if somebody wasn't ready for it. And then you have cards like this, Muse of Music, which might connect to your occupation or the archetype that you're trying to work through. This is a really, really good deck. So again, that's the Divine Muses. Of course, it's an indie deck, so it's more expensive. This is mass market deck, so Victoria Mosley's deck. And what I did in the walkthrough was I tried to pair up similar energies of the cards. So if you are interested in incorporating this kind of a deck, so that's a really beautiful card, Grace. And so sometimes with a deck like this, you might get an occupation, you might get a culture, you might get a layer, a karmic layer come through. And that's why I use 3 oracle decks and 1 tarot deck, because I want to weave a story. I want to weave a story. And it takes time. Like, these are not quickie readings. And sometimes you need to lay them out and do a little bit of journaling and then walk away and come back. And sometimes you need to pick up the associated oracle book and begin to read it. So if you're using something like the Weaver's Oracle, which is, you know what I was saying about the Beautiful Rebellion, how those cards are kind of like a piece of a big picture. These ones, so for those of you that don't know this deck, Carolyn Hillier, this is her life work. So these art pieces were created 6 to 8 feet tall. And in each of these pictures, so the fabrics for the costumes, the weavings, the drums, all of the pieces that are included were actually created for the painting. It's just such an amazing, amazing deck. So there is definitely a dominant feminine energy to this deck, but in the introduction to the guidebook, she talks about that weaving of the lunar masculine and the solar feminine and how important it is to incorporate and process that within every single one of us. And so this is definitely a more masculine energy. And then we have lots and lots of older souls where it's impossible to tell if it's male or female. And of course, there's lots of bare-breasted ones too. But this deck has so many different cultures incorporated. And so again, you have this opportunity to bring in a cultural piece. The guidebook that goes with this deck is not something that you can quickly pick up and go, oh, okay, that's what this card means. This guidebook so there's a page for every card. There's an association with a direction. So within these cards in this deck, there are, there's clans. And then the clans are all associated, each of the clans, there's directions. So there's a grid within this deck. And there's a leader for each of the clans. And so these are really beautiful cards to sit with for a week or a month and to begin to explore their energy. And because the poetry of the guidebook, and I call it poetry because it's a yarn, right? It's beautiful, beautiful language. Sometimes it's a little hard to digest. And so what tends to happen is there will be a sentence or a phrase that pops off the page that fits into and weaves in with the other cards that you're using in the reading. So we're almost at an hour. Okay, what else have I got here? I want to talk about these two and how these two decks, or these kind of decks, are important for this kind of a reading. So I was talking about what happens if you pick, the slavery card or something. What happens if you choose, let's see, choose. You choose, you draw, you chose it. I'm just trying to think. Okay, this is a good one. What happens if you choose the monk or the nun card? You probably, over lifetimes, have given certain vows. Vows of renunciation, vows of chastity, vows of poverty. If you were a slave owner, you would have taken, vows, and you would have signed things in accordance with the rules of that time. And the teachings go that these vows that we take energetically are embedded in our DNA, energetically embedded in our aura, in our energy body. And one of the beautiful pieces of work, so if you've drawn this card, what might come up is like cards like 5 of Pentacles and other cards that show hardship. There might definitely be a pattern of poverty in this lifetime, lack of abundance. And so through this work, what needs to happen is a release of these vows in all directions of time. If I have ever taken a vow of poverty, I release this vow in all directions of time. And I see myself living abundantly and freely. And there's a few cards in this deck so this is the Past Lives deck, the DV and Brian Weiss deck. And in Carolyn Meiss's book, so this is connected to her book, Sacred Contracts, this deck. And I don't think this deck was ever meant to be used as a, for past life readings or anything. So I'm just I want to give you another example of what I was talking about. Here's a slave card here too. This is a really big archetype. And there are so many. Let me think of another one. Okay, so maybe there's a card like this that comes up, witch or mystic or something like that. And perhaps you have taken a vow in your coven, in your sisterhood or your brotherhood, to keep your spirituality sacred and within, and to not share it with other people. Because if you share it with other people, you're going to get burned at the stake because you're going to end up dead. So you've taken this vow to not share your spirituality. And so in this lifetime, that's my dog, she wants her supper. And in this lifetime, you are struggling with your spirituality. You're struggling with the sharing and the connection of people with your spirituality. And so that's what happens sometimes with these kind of cards, is that they will clear up what the pattern is really about. And I just want you to keep in mind about this kind of, it's a really, really beautiful way to let things go. And you can think about, like sometimes we think in this, like, what kind of vows have you taken in this lifetime? Vows, if you've taken vows around your marriage, and if you look at the language of those vows, if you have taken other vows as a doctor or vows as the healer vows are really, really important too. Just keep that in mind, because the teachings around the taking of vows, I think, are more powerful than we realize. Okay, so these kind of decks can really help to bring that up. I am already past an hour. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of briefly show you other decks that I work with, and then we'll kind of wind this up. So Rosie Aronson's deck is, it's kind of a link into the gene keys. And I know a lot of you work with, there's so many different programs out there. But one of the things I like about the gene keys is that, so the gene keys is Richard Rudd's program. And Rosie studied the gene keys and worked with, and created this deck in response to those teachings. And on each of these cards, I'm going to finish my thought. I don't want to rush through this because this is important. So on Carolyn Meiss's deck, on every single card, you have the light and you have the shadow. And if you draw a card like this, it's probably the shadow that is causing you the issue in this lifetime. And in order to clear the shadow, you need to work with the light, right? In Rosie's deck, on the bottom of every single card, the key word is one of 3 layers of processing the energy of this teaching. And if you go to the guidebook, it explains what the shadow is of this keyword, and then also the city. So the city is the more, the lighter, higher frequency energy of this particular keyword. So this keyword is called the gift. And in the guidebook, it talks about the shadow as well as the city, which is the higher frequency. So this deck is, I would use this one or this one, not both. And they are both equally powerful programs to work with this kind of reading. So I know this is a lot. I hope this is helpful for you in putting together this kind of experience for yourself or for your clients. And then I have a few other mass market decks here. I'm just going to really quickly show you because a lot of people have these decks. So these are 2 of Colette's Baron Reed's decks, Wisdom of the Oracle and the Enchanted Map. And there's something about the Enchanted Map, which is a bit like Stacey DeMarco's deck. So Stacey DeMarco's deck was the this one, the one that has all of those sacred places around the world. If you have never read, I should actually do a video on this deck. I thought, after I got that, I have a couple copies of this deck. Because I've been to quite a few places in this deck. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to make this deck a project and to go to many more of these places on this deck? And she talks about the energy of all of these places. But so in the same way, this deck that Colette created it's a little more mystical and fairy tale like, but it has, and now I'm looking at it and I can't even really find it. Now it's looking very fairy tale like, so it's going to look like it's going to match really well with the Enchanted Tarot. But there's some cards in this deck that take you to different places in the universe, and maybe not necessarily in this 3-dimensional plane, but they take you to kind of, 4th dimension, 5th dimension magical places that, like this one. So you might not connect with the keyword, but the desert there might speak to something else in your reading. And similarly, so on this card, it says goblins, but if you cover up the keyword, I think the strength of these deck is in Jenna Della Grataglia's backgrounds, because there's something really, really cool in the backgrounds of that deck. And Wisdom of the Oracle has a similar feeling. So if you are kind of playing with this and starting out with this and you happen to have these decks, they do work well with these readings. Similarly, Kyle Gray's Angels and Ancestors has that layer of lots of different cultures. And when I'm doing a past life reading, because there's a few cards in here that I mean, this is just stunning, right? Just perfect. But there's a few cards in here that I might pull out. Like some of the angel cards, I might pull out intentionally because it's not what I want to, it's not where I want to go with this reading. And like this snake card says, shed old skin, but that's what we're doing anyway, right? We're trying to shed old skin. So there in this deck, there's a bulk of the cards that I would keep in and some of them I would take out because they don't all necessarily fit in with the intention, but that would be up to you. But that is it's a good deck. It's a deck that works really, really well. And then as I was racing out the door the other day, I thought, yes, use Whispers of Ganesh, because the energy of Ganesh is about understanding what those blocks are. So sometimes the energy of Ganesh is presented because it's there, so we go this way. But sometimes it's there because we need to face it and we need to look at it. And there is, have you seen this deck? It's got this beautiful color tone, right? It's a kind of a mystical, I don't know what the filter is on this deck, but it feels otherworldly. It feels magical. And the keywords in this deck are excellent. And they definitely will, this is not what I've used with the past life readings, but it would work so well to help, because it also has chakra associations. And it has some like really, really beautiful keywords. So here's a card for an example, and I think this is a really good place to wind up today. As I look, and it's 111, yay. Right? So this is a huge one, and however this manifests in your story will be reflected in the other cards as well. And you're going to get a really beautiful message in the guidebook about this as well too. You know, about embracing yourself exactly as you are and understanding that you are perfect exactly as you are and you don't need to change yourself for anybody else. Yeah, so this is definitely a new one that I thought to bring into these readings. So thank you. The chat's really slowed down. I don't know whether I'm talking too much or sharing too much, but let me know how this sits with you. And if you have any questions, please write them in the comments below, and I'll be happy to carry on this conversation with you one-on-one. And yeah, so if you want to do this kind of a reading with me, we can do this from a distance as well too. Or I can walk you, if you want to do your own reading, and then you want me to help you interpret your reading or help you to guide you into a meditation for this reading. Because so when I do this kind of reading, I think of this one and my medicine wheel reading. I really spend a lot of time in setting up the energy of the space, the sacred space, and making the space, wherever it is, sacred, raising the frequency, making sure the electronics are shut off, making sure that the the air is clean and clear. I choose my crystals, and I sit in meditation and really prepare for this kind of reading. So yeah, so that one and my medicine wheel reading, I feel like I take them really seriously because they are really, really sacred work. Yeah. So let me know if I can be of service further to you on this topic. And thank you all very much for being here. There's a couple other questions. Let me see if I can address those quickly. Something about Margaret Peterson and the Handle Tarot. So Margaret Peterson. I would use Margaret Peterson. Yes. And another one that I'm thinking too is the Rumi Oracle. So the Rumi Oracle. and using the Margaret Peterson and the Rumi Oracle, and then a couple of other decks, because to me, these are more shadow. I would use more for a shadow reading. I feel that with a past life reading, the energy of culture, I was saying, like, pick a deck that transcends culture and transcends time, but the deck also needs to have a variety of culture, or have cues or clues that take you to a time and a place, so that you can weave in the family, the personal, and geographic culture. And with Margaret Peterson, you're looking at this abstract artwork, and in some of the paintings, you are familiar with a space and a time, and others, it's just abstract art. So if you're going to use a deck like that, or the Handel Tarot, you need to bring in decks that bring out, you need to weave in other decks so that connects somehow to those things that I've talked about. Okay. You're welcome, Kyle. Yeah. So Amber says goodbye as well too. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here tonight. I'm going to sign off. Stay well. Namaste.